All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle one of the biggest, most fundamental questions there is, a question that really gets to the heart of how we all live together. And that question is, what do we owe each other? It shapes everything, our friendships, our communities, our entire idea of what it means to be a good person. So let's explore some really powerful ideas about our moral duties.
No, really, just take a second and think about that. As a friend, a citizen, a member of a family, just as a person, what are your real fundamental obligations to the people around you? This single question is basically the bedrock of our entire moral world.
You know, we talk a lot about our rights, right? What we're entitled to, what society owes us. But rights are only half the story. They're like one side of a coin. Because for every single right that exists, there has to be a matching duty on the other side. If you have a right to life, then I have a duty not to harm you. They're two parts of the exact same relationship.
So here's the roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the internal source of morality, Kant's idea of the good will. Then we'll get into the real world and see what happens when our duties crash into each other. After that, we'll zoom way out to see how we might design a truly just society. And finally, we'll tie it all together to get a clear picture of our duties, from ourselves all the way out to the world.
Okay, first up, the legendary philosopher Emmanuel Kant. Now, Kant wanted to find a basis for morality that didn't depend on, shifting emotions or specific religious texts. He wanted something universal, based on pure reason. And his entire ethical system kicks off with one really powerful question.
So what's something that is good in and of itself always, no matter what? It can't be intelligence, right? Because a brilliant criminal can use their smarts for evil. It's not courage, because a terrorist can be courageous. It's not even happiness. You could be perfectly happy doing some truly awful things. So what's left?
For Kant, the answer, the only possible answer, is a good will. A good will is simply the intention to do the right thing. That's it. It's the engine of morality. And for Kant, what makes a will good has everything to do with why you're doing it. It's all about your motive.
And this brings us to Kant's whole school of thought, which has a fancy name, deontology. It comes from the Greek word deon, which just means duty. For a deontologist, morality isn't about getting the best outcome or making the most people happy. It's about following the right rules and doing your duty, full stop. The action itself is what counts.
Now, Kant makes a super important distinction here. It's not enough to just do the right thing. You have to do it for the right reason. He separates acting in accordance with duty, that's when you do the right thing, but your motive is kind of selfish or maybe just emotional, from acting from duty, and that's when you do the right thing simply because you know it's your moral obligation. For Kant, only the second one has any real moral worth.
Kant's famous shopkeeper example makes this crystal clear. Okay, so imagine a shopkeeper gives the correct change to a little kid. Why do you do it? Well, if it's for self-interest, to protect his reputation so people keep shopping there, Kant says that's not a moral act. If he does it from inclination, because he just really likes the kid and feels affection, that's nice, but still not moral. It's only when he gives a correct change because it is his duty to be honest. That's when the act has true moral value.
Okay, so Kant's system is really powerful, but it runs into a pretty big problem. His duties are absolute. They're non-negotiable. So what happens when these absolute, unbreakable rules crash into each other out in the messy real world?
Think about this classic dilemma. You have a duty to keep your promise to your friend, but on the way, you see a car wreck and someone is hurt. You also have a duty to help people in need. You literally cannot do both. Kant's theory of absolute rules doesn't really give us a way to choose. What do you do?
This is where another philosopher, W.D. Ross, comes in with a much more practical take. He introduced the idea of prima facie duties. Prima facie is just Latin for at first glance. The idea is that these duties are real and they are binding, but they aren't absolute. When they conflict, we have to use our judgment to figure out which one is more important in that moment. Ross actually gave us a toolkit of 7 of these duties, things like fidelity, keeping promises, gratitude, and justice. So, back to our car crash. We have a conflict between the duty of fidelity to our friend and the duty of no ill will, which basically means don't harm others, and by extension, help those who are in harm's way. Ross says, look, our moral intuition tells us that the duty to help someone who is literally in danger is way more important than keeping a coffee date. His framework doesn't give us a magic formula, but it trusts us to use our moral judgment to sort through these tough spots.
So, we've looked at our inner motives with Kant and our duties to others with Ross. Now, let's zoom out to our biggest duty of all. How do we build a fair society for everyone? This question was the life's work of the philosopher John Rawls.
So here's the fundamental problem Rawls is trying to solve. Every one of us has a different idea of what's fair. And let's be honest, those ideas are almost always shaped by our own situation. A billionaire CEO and a minimum wage worker are probably going to have very different ideas about what a fair tax system looks like. Our own self-interest makes it almost impossible to be objective.
To get around this, Rawls came up with one of the most brilliant thought experiments in modern philosophy: the veil of ignorance. Imagine you get to be part of a committee that designs the rules for a brand new society. But here's the catch. You have absolutely no idea who you are going to be in that society.
Behind this veil, you don't know your social class, your gender, your natural talents, your health, nothing. You have to choose the rules from a position of pure impartiality. Think about it. You wouldn't design a society that allows for slavery because you might end up being the slave. You would design a society that's as fair as possible for everyone because you could end up being anyone at all.
Rawls argued that from this neutral starting point, every rational person would agree on two fundamental principles of justice.
The first one is the liberty principle. This is pretty straightforward. It just means everyone gets the maximum amount of basic freedom possible. Freedom of speech, the right to vote, all that good stuff. And these freedoms have to be equal for absolutely everyone.
Okay, the second one is the difference principle. And this one is pretty radical. It says that social and economic inequalities, like some people being richer than others, are only justified if they work to the greatest possible benefit of the least advantaged person. So sure, it's okay for a doctor to earn more than a cashier, but only if that system ultimately provides better, more affordable healthcare for everyone, especially for that cashier.
So after this whole journey through some of the biggest ideas in ethics, where does that leave us? What is our duty? Well, it seems like it's a journey that moves from the inside out.
It all starts with the self, right? With Kant's call to act from a good will, to do the right thing just because it's the right thing. Then it moves outward to how we deal with other people, using Rawls's framework to weigh our different duties. And finally, it expands to all of society, with Rawls's powerful argument that our ultimate collective duty is to build a world that is fundamentally fair for every single person, especially those with the least.
And that brings us to a final thought and a little challenge for you. Let's make this personal. If you were really behind that veil, totally impartial, what's the one rule you would absolutely insist on to make the world you're about to be born into a more just and fair place? Really think about it. That's all for this explainer. Thanks for joining me.